In the last video, we looked at what's involved in taking a quantity, taking a number that's expressed in decimal form, and converting it to its equivalent amount expressed as a fraction. Here we want to go the reverse direction. We want to start with a fraction, and we want to see what the equivalent amount would be if we expressed it as a decimal number. So let's start with one like 4/5, the fraction 4/5. To change a fraction to a decimal, you take the denominator and divide it into the numerator. So if we were going to have to do the division by hand the old-fashioned way, the 4, the numerator, would be put under the old-fashioned division sign. If we were using our calculator, the 4 would get put into the calculator first. Then we would hit the division sign. Then we would put in the 5, hit the equal sign. That would give us the decimal equivalent of the fraction 4/5. In this case, 5 won't go into 4. 5 goes into 48 times, and leaving us no remainder. So the decimal equivalent of the fraction 4/5, the decimal equivalent would be 8/10. So if you have 4/5 of a chocolate bar, somebody else could say, yes, you have 8/10 of a chocolate bar, and they would be talking about the same quantity. Here it's expressed as a fraction, here it's expressed as a decimal. So if we wanted to convert the fraction 3/16 to its equivalent as a decimal, again, the 3, the numerator, is put under the division sign. The 16 would go on the outside. Or if you're using your calculator, the 3 would be put in first, then you'd hit your divide sign, then you'd put in 16 and hit the equal sign. That would give you your decimal equivalent. And the decimal equivalent to 3/16 is 0. I got to check here to make sure I'm right, 1875. So that's tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So 1,875 10,000ths is the decimal equivalent of 3/16. Now, sometimes where that becomes important is in dealing with, like in, say, auto mechanics. They sometimes talk about things in fraction form, like a wrench or a bolt. They'll talk about it in fraction form, and sometimes they talk about it in decimal form. So there's a place where those two forms occur. Both of these fractions have an exact decimal equivalence. When we do the division with our calculator, it terminates after the 8. There are no more digits after the 8. 3/16, when we convert that to a decimal, it terminates after the 5. There are no more digits after the 5. But if we take 5/6 and we convert 5/6 to its equivalent as a decimal, when we put the 5 into our calculator, hit the divide sign, put in the 6, hit the equal sign, this is what we will see displayed. And it would continue to display 3's until it filled the display of our calculator. So in this instance, we say that this fraction does not have an exact equivalence as a decimal. In fact, the decimal is what we call a repeating decimal. And perhaps you remember how you express the fact that you have a repeating decimal. You put a horizontal bar above the portion that repeats. In this case, it's just the digit 3 that repeats. And drop everything that comes after. So the decimal equivalent here of 5/6 is not exact as it was here with these two fractions. It's a repeating decimal, which we can express using this type of notation. Well, sometimes when we want to convert a fraction to a decimal, it may be a repeating situation, but it might be a whole bunch of digits that repeat. In fact, here's an example of that. If we convert the fraction 11/26 to its equivalent as a decimal, when we would do that division, when we would put in 11, hit your divide sign, put in 26, hit the equal sign, you would get a display that started like this, and then the 2, 3, 0, 7, 6, 9 would repeat again. Well, we don't want to put the bar over all those digits and show that that's repeating. So typically what we do then is we would round that decimal equivalent to some particular decimal place. Let's suppose we wanted to round this to the nearest hundredth. Do you remember how to do that? To round to the hundredth, you look at the thousands place. If this is 5 or greater, you increase this by 1 and drop all the digits afterwards. If it's 4 or less, you simply drop the digits and leave that digit alone. So if we were going to round this to the nearest hundredth, it would simply be 0.42. So once again, the fraction 11/26 does not have an exact decimal representation. In a situation like this, we would want to round the decimal equivalents to some particular decimal place. And generally, you'll be told what decimal place is the appropriate one to use when you have a situation like this.